Before philosophy became debate, it was initiation. Before the world was ready for reason, Pythagoras built a gate. You couldn't walk through it simply because you were curious. You had to prove you were ready to bear harmony itself. The rule was simple: only the wealthy may enter. Croydon, 6th century BCE. A small circle of men and women gathered in secrecy at night. They carried no weapons, no symbols, only silence. Pythagoras greeted them not as a preacher, but as a tuner of instruments. He believed the soul was a string, and that unless it vibrated at the right frequency, truth would shatter it. That's why he built the community like an instrument, not a school. No one spoke for 5 years after entering. No one was allowed to question until silence had taught them how. Only those who endured that stillness were shown the inner diagrams, the sacred proportions that bound cosmos, number, and soul. Most never lasted. They called the rule cruelty, but the few who endured became luminous. Worthiness was never moral, it was structural. The untrained mind is noisy. It cannot perceive harmony because it vibrates in contradiction. To approach the truth, Pythagoras said, someone must first become music. That's why silence was the first trial, not obedience, alignment. The silence stripped away performance, opinion, chatter. It killed the illusion of knowing. After months of quiet, what remained was resonance, an internal tuning to the universal rhythm. Only then could geometry enter the soul without distortion. Modern people hate secrets. They confuse openness with honesty, inclusion with virtue. But the ancients understood what the moderns forget. Truth is a force. It expands or destroys depending on the vessel. Give fire to the unsteady and it burns them. Give harmony to the impure and it drives them mad. That's why initiation existed, not to exclude, but to protect both truth and the seeker. Pythagoras didn't hide knowledge out of arrogance, he hid it to preserve order. The unworthy weren't evil, they were unstable, they were not ready. History proves his point. Every time sacred knowledge leaked to the unprepared, it was corrupted into superstition or weaponized into control. Numbers became currency instead of symbol. Harmony became comfort instead of discipline. Philosophy became argument instead of assent. Pythagoras saw it coming. That's why he tested silence. If you couldn't bear stillness, you couldn't bear truth. Today, the world is a carnival of voices. Everyone speaks, few listen, no one tunes. Opinion has replaced initiation, information has replaced knowledge. The internet has given the unready what used to require decades of refinement: access. And yet, despite all that access, clarity has vanished. That's why the Catharsian path must restore the gate, not to hide, but to honor sequence. Only the disciplined eye can handle illumination. Pythagoras taught that the door to wisdom was narrow because the soul is large with illusion. You must compress to pass through. In every temple of initiation, a threshold marked this shift. You left your name, possessions, and beliefs outside. Inside, silence replaced identity. The door was psychological. It said, you may enter only when you've died to noise. That remains the Catharsian law. To be worthy is to be able to contain paradox without panic, to hear criticism without collapsing, to observe chaos without losing proportion. That's the test Pythagoras gave every initiate, not in words, but in waiting. Those who passed entered not a school, but a state. They didn't learn truth, they remembered it. if you've always felt that not everyone can understand what you see, if silence has begun to feel like home, then you are a Pythagorean. Begin your path now. Join the Catharsians on Patreon today. The Pythagorean path, silence as alignment, prepare the vessel for harmony. Diogenes' barrel, radical simplification, stripe away all distortion. The Aurelius Council, the architects of propulsion, building order from within. Truth is not hidden, it is filtered inside the Catharsians on Patreon. Join today and begin your journey. Silence was only the gate, purity was the climb. Pythagoras taught that the universe speaks in ratios, every note, distance, and orbit expressing proportion. To receive those harmonies, the initiate's own life had to become proportionate. The test was not knowledge, it was alignment. You could recite every theorem and still fail. But if your gestures, appetite, and temper moved in rhythm with number, you were already inside. The Pythagoreans examined purity through four dimensions: body, speech, thought, and motive. Each mirrored an element of harmony. First was the body, rhythm. They observed how you walked, ate, breathed. Disorder in movement meant dissonance in mind. The body had to keep time with the cosmos, neither sluggish nor frantic, balanced between stillness and action. Then there was speech, measure. Every word was weighed like a note. Idle talk fractured resonance. They believed that lying damaged the geometry of the throat, the channel through which number became sound. Then there was thought, ratio. The inner monologue had to obey proportion. Fantasies were excess, worry, deficiency. Thinking has to be tuned to necessity, not noise. And then there was motive, the axis. The final test, measured intention. Selfish curiosity bent perception inward. Only service to order kept the axis upright. Fail one of those, and you were sent back to silence until balance returned. Virtue, Pythagoras said, is harmony. The Greeks didn't moralize it, they measured it. Anger wasn't sane, it was a distortion in ratio. Desire wasn't evil, it was an overtone that droned the bass note. When the initiates fasted, it was calibration. When they rose at dawn to contemplate geometric figures, they were aligning psyche with cosmos. Purity was clarity within, nothing excessive, nothing missing, the square complete. To the Pythagoreans, impurity was any vibration that couldn't hold silence inside it. That's why they avoided argument. Debate, they said, turns harmony into combat. They replaced it with inquiry, a sequence of questions that revealed proportion between ignorance and truth. The goal wasn't victory, it was equilibrium. That's why the world calls philosophers detached. They're not cold, they're tuned. The louder the world becomes, the quieter they move. Modern minds worship speed. They mistake movement for evolution, but velocity without ratio is noise. Our age has knowledge without symmetry, emotion without anchor. We hear every frequency at once and call it freedom. It is only distortion. That's why modern seekers rarely cross the gate. They want revelation without refinement, power without preparation. Pythagoras would have sent them back to silence. The Catharsian must restore that trial, not through asceticism, but through equilibrium. To move cleanly in chaos is the new purity. That's catharsis. Every Pythagorean vow was a geometry of boundary. Eat until the body obeys, not until desire commands. Speak when silence was ripened into necessity. Rest before exhaustion bends propulsion. Study only what sharpens perception, not what flatters intellect. These were not moral rules, they were musical scales. Mastery of limit produced resonance. Plato later called this sophrosyne, which means temperance, the harmony between extremes. Marcus Aurelius called it straight walking. The Catharsian calls it frequency. Unpurified fire destroys. Pythagoras saw that raw insight can unhinge the unready. Before learning the secret of number, the unity behind opposites, candidates had to demonstrate moral geometry. Only a proportionate mind could hold contradiction without collapse. Only a purified will could bear freedom without corruption. That's why modern power corrupts. It reaches people before discipline does. The ancients reserved the order purity first, power second. If you've begun to crave silence after noise, if you've grown allergic to excess, if your instincts now prefer balance to drama, you're a Pythagorean, you're a Carthaginian leader. Don't waste more time in their systems. You don't belong there. Join the Catharsians today on Patreon for those enduring purification, the Pythagorean path, daily calibration of body, speech, thought, and motive. Diogenes' barrel, live beneath noise, reduce life to its harmonic skeleton. The Aurelius Council, builders of proportion, law forged from clarity. Join the Catharsians today on Patreon and reclaim your suppressed power as a leader. After silence and purification came revelation. The initiate was led into a dark chamber, lit by one flame reflected on polished bronze. On the floor, geometric figures glowed in chalk: triangle, square, circle, spiral. Pythagoras pointed to them and whispered, "Everything that exists is built of this." He wasn't speaking of mathematics as merchants used it. He was naming the architecture of being. Number was the language of the gods. To understand it was to read creation directly, without priests, without myth, without permission. That was the fire he guarded. To the untrained, two and three are just quantities. To Pythagoras, they were principles. One, that's the monad, the origin, unity, the seed of all form, the good. Two, the diet, division, reflection, tension. Three, the triad, resolution, balance. Four, the tetrad, manifestation, matter, completion. From them arose the ten, the tetrarchy, summing one plus two plus three plus four. Ten was perfection, the cosmos closed and whole. For the initiate, counting was prayer. Each number named a vibration of existence. To measure number, to deceive, to lie, to exploit measure for greed was profanity. Pythagoras heard music in the blacksmith's hammer. He discovered that harmony follows ratio. Two strings tuned at the proportion 2 to 1 sound the same note, one octave apart. From that insight, he derived the law. Justice is proportion. Everything, the body, the city, the universe, depends on ratio. Extremes collapse, balance endures. That's why the community practiced moderation, not as morality, but as physics. A lie is a broken ratio between word and fact. Greed is a broken ratio between need and possession. Cruelty is imbalance between power and empathy. The worthy could enter because their lives had become mathematically stable. Only such souls could mirror the order of heaven. Once the novice could hold a compass without trembling, lessons began. They traced circles until they could feel their perfection rather than see it. They learned that a triangle isn't a drawing, it's the minimum condition for stability. They discovered that the square stands for justice because all sides are equal. The pentagram for life because it contains the golden ratio, the secret of organic growth. Geometry wasn't abstraction, it was meditation. Each figure purified perception, teaching that beauty and law are the same thing seen from different angles. To draw correctly was to think correctly. The Pythagorean said every human carries a formula. Soul is equal to number times fire. Number is structure, fire is motion. Without number, fire burns chaos. Without fire, number freezes. Harmony is their marriage. That's the real secret of the Pythagoreans. They weren't studying triangles, they were learning how to live as triangles, stable base, striving apex, equilibrium between. That's why later Stoics called logos what Marcus Aurelius named the ruling principle. Knowledge that pure can overturn empires. If justice is proportion, then kings are accountable to geometry, not blood. If harmony is law, then no priest can sell salvation. The moment people understand number as divine, hierarchy collapses. That's why Pythagoras was hated. His community threatened every institution built on opacity. They wanted mysticism for rulers. He offered it to reason. The temple burned. The community scattered. But the diagram survived. They became Plato's dialogues, Euclid's axioms, the skeleton of Western thought. The world forgot the secrecy, but kept the shapes. Today, the same fire hides inside systems, algorithms, architecture, rhythm, finance. The difference is reverence. Modernity uses number to dominate. The ancients used it to align. The Catharsian revival demands return to sacred arithmetic. Count only what sustains. Measure before judging. Balance before speaking. To live numerically is to live lucidly. It is to see cause and effect with geometric mercy. If you feel drawn to structure rather than spectacle, if you trust proportion more than opinion, if truth to you always sounds like music, you are remembering the fire of number. You're a Pythagorean. Don't waste more time in their systems. You don't belong among placeholders. You're a Catharsian. Join the Catharsians today on Patreon and begin your journey. The Pythagorean path. Study ratio until thought becomes rhythm. Diogenes' barrel. Practice subtraction. Remove what distorts symmetry. The Aurelius Council. Builders who translate geometry into governance. Number is not knowledge, it is divinity in fraction form. Touch it carefully, burn cleanly. Join the Catharsians today on Patreon and reclaim your suppressed power as a leader.